I'm Caitlin Regal. I'm 28 years old. I was born in Columbus, but I now live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I am pretty much an everything addict. Um, what I mean by that is I'm a garbage junkie. I'll do anything that's in front of me. Whatever it is that changes my mind or how I feel, I will do it. I will overindulge in just about anything, caffeine, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. Um, So I'll tell a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. Um, so I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm the youngest of 5 children. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And my earliest memory is pretty much just the fact that I was a little bit different. Um, and what I mean by that is not like the cliche of, oh, I felt different or whatever. I felt different for sure, but I always knew that I was different. And my brothers and sisters all have the same dad. I have a different dad. And I knew that, like from a very young age, I knew that. But I also knew from a very young age that I was gay, which also made me different. And that pretty much stunted my self-worth. My mom was in an abusive relationship for a little while when I was very young too, which also, kind of stunted my self-worth, because regardless of what my mother did, it wasn't good enough, and there were consequences for that. So I kind of internalized that and felt the same way. The way that I ended up in Cincinnati was my mom left that abusive situation. So I came here. I don't know how old I was. I was probably like 8 to 10 somewhere. I was still pretty young. But again, like what I remember the most of is that my poor mom. I remember acting out alcoholically before any kind of substances were involved. I was a horrible child. I feel so bad for my mom. Because like my memories of like being in school and things like that was I was a terror. I remember in 3rd grade that I had to carry this clipboard around to all my classes, and it said like talked out of turn or didn't raise hand, interrupted or whatever, and I would give it to my teachers if I did one of these things. They would put a check mark next to it. I had to turn it into my principal every day, and if I had more than 3 check marks, I had detention the next day. And I had detention probably every single day in 3rd grade, and my mom would pick me up and she would say, "You have detention tomorrow, don't you?" And I would be like, "Yeah, but listen, my teacher hates me," or, "I didn't really do this, but she marked it anyway." So from a very small age, like I was justifying my actions, rationalizing my behaviors and what I was doing, or minimizing them. And I just remember acting out like that for the longest period of time. So that was, 3rd grade elementary school. I remember doing that a lot, or not turning in homework or not doing whatever it was, just sort of acting out. Going into middle school, I mean, this just continued for forever. So going into middle school, I was the same exact way. I learned how to skip class and, get away with, not doing my homework or, justifying my behaviors, whatever it was. But then I also picked up theft. I just acted out in these ways that a typical child doesn't act out in. And I remember like there was no purpose to me stealing. I would just steal the most random things. I got suspended one time for stealing volleyball jerseys, and what was I gonna do with them? I don't know why I even did that, but it was just, that's just what I did. I just acted out as much as possible. And that was just like the common theme through my life. So I continued to do that. I would get in fights, skip school, all these things. And I think my mom finally got fed up with it. So she moved us like a mile down the road maybe not even, from where we had lived before. And she told me that we crossed over the school line, so I had to go to this other school. And I think she lied. But so I went to that new school, and I don't think I talked to anyone for 6 months because I was so mad about it. And so that was the middle of my 8th grade year. So I just continued to act out and do, pretty much whatever I wanted to do. And then I got into high school, and high school brought about a new set of friends, and basically everyone started driving, and, it was just more acting out. And that's what I did. I skipped so much school. I think I was just about to get, some truancy charges. My principal woke me up one time. I was in one of the soundproof rooms, sleeping. I just did whatever I wanted to do. But while I was in high school, I was also introduced to substances. It started with alcohol, and, so I overindulged in everything. So I drank alcohol to excess, and that's what I did for weeks. And then I was introduced to marijuana, and I did the same thing. I just overindulge in whatever it is. About this time too, I had a friend that went to my old school, and I would always hang out with her. And there was a situation where we went to somebody's house when we were not supposed to. And I decided that I would take the car for a, joyride. So my first ever charges were, it was when I was 15, and they were felony charges. At age 15, I was on probation, and I, pretty much set myself up for failure. Most other kids were, playing sports and, enjoying their lives as, teenagers, and here I am in court and, on probation, having to take drug tests. And I think actually it was really just a slap on the wrist. And I didn't know it then, but I know now looking back, I think they took mercy on me. I had some community service and, probation and all that, but it wasn't really any consequences that I reacted to or had. I didn't feel the impact of the consequences. So it just in my mind was like, oh, well, I can still do whatever I want, and this is what will happen. So I had that happen, and then I really didn't want to do anything that had to do with school. The only reason I went to school was to hang out with my friends, or what I thought were friends. And it was just like a social experience for me. It wasn't, getting my education. So I ruined my education. Going into my senior year, I needed 11 and a half credits to just graduate, and that's not obtainable in 1 year. So I ended up dropping out. And that's probably the only thing that I continue to regret to this day. I got my GED shortly after and all of that, but I do regret, not walking across the stage with the people that I went through school with. It's an experience that I won't ever get to have. But so I dropped out. And there was a moment where I think my mom had moved to Texas, and it was just my stepdad that was there, and I don't know, it was, to me it was like, okay, well, I have a job, and I'm not in school, I don't have any obligations, so I'll move in with a friend of mine. And basically what that entailed was, I didn't have any bills, I still, just lived there, and we just partied all the time. That's what I did. And by this time I was, drinking alcohol, I was smoking the weed, and I was introduced to Xanax. And I loved them because I really didn't have to sit with myself. I just didn't like who I was, so I always had this front up, or, this wall or this mask on, and I just pretended all of the time to be someone else that I thought everyone else would like. And because of that, I really did lose who I was underneath. Like, I didn't know who I was anymore because I was just acting like someone else all the time. And looking back now, like, I can see why I had so many self-worth issues. And I get it now, because it's like I pretended to have self-worth, but the more that I like pretended to have this self-worth, like, the more it was really stealing from me. So I moved in with a friend of mine, and we partied all the time, and I was doing the Xanax, and I really loved them. So in order to like keep that going, I started selling them. And I did that for a little while until, the cardinal rule is you don't get high off your own supply. And I couldn't help myself. I could never stop. There was no stop switch in my brain. So I just kept using. And my entire life is just this series of like baby steps of progression. So my addiction is just, these baby steps of progression until it got to the point where it was like the worst of the worst. And that's what I did. So immediately when I was 18, I think it was like a month after I was 18, I, had a situation with a run-in with the cops, and I carried paraphernalia on me all the time. So I got some charges as a result of that. So I was immediately on probation, had all these legal fines, and, because of that, and because I couldn't, hit the stop switch, I was in and out of jail all the time. And I had gone to jail, and I was in there for like 2 weeks. So for 9 days straight, I hallucinated as a result of withdrawal from the Xanax. And it was the worst experience I've ever had. I didn't know what was going on, how many days I had been there. And it was just a situation where I didn't want to have to go through it again. So I switched my drug. So instead of doing the Xanax, I switched over to something else. And that's pretty much what I did. I started doing Opanas for a little while. And when that seemed unmanageable, I switched to cocaine for a little while. Ecstasy, that was a hot while. And this was the thing, like, I would just like feel different about it one day, and I'd be like, all right, it's time to switch. Like with the ecstasy, I actually like Googled something about it, and basically what it says is all the happiness that it gives you, all the serotonin that it puts in your brain, like it equally steals that permanently. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm depressed all the time, and this is why I don't feel happy anymore. So I was like, okay, it's time to switch. So again, like just baby steps of progression, and I ended up doing pain pills. And that led to heroin. And heroin was like the end all. And it was like the moment that I was like, God, where has this one been? Like, where has this been? This is exactly who I want to be. This is exactly what I, want to or don't want to feel. And that was it. There was no going back from that. So at this time, like, I'm just now learning that I'm gay at the time too. Like, not learning, but like dealing with it really. I had told my mom, and that was the only person. But at this time, like I didn't know anyone that was gay. And I didn't know, I don't know, it wasn't as known as it is today. And that's something that like really, really affected me. Because I thought that to be a typical person or like a normal person, I had to be in like a heterosexual relationship, and I did that. And these poor men that I dated, like I knew that I was gay, and I would still date them and have these relationships, and knowing that at the end of the day, like we were gonna break up, that it was never gonna happen. So I really like led them on, but I was trying to like fix myself. And because I thought, like, this will work. If I just pretend to do this for a while, I will really become this person, and I'll be normal. So I did that, but again, it like really played on my self-worth and made me feel like an even worse of a person at the end of the day, because I felt like I was like ruining them. But so that really, I struggled with that a lot, because it was like I can't be who I want to be, or who I was made to be. So it was an internal struggle that was like a daily thing. But so, I was in and out of jail, and, I had moved to the heroin. And this really just brought about the most consequences that I've ever dealt with. So I was, obviously, the legal issues. It literally just stunted everything in my life. Like, I didn't know how to live like a normal person. All I knew was heroin, and it made itself my priority and my only priority. At the end of the day, like, it was whatever I needed to do in order to like get more heroin or get my fix. That's what was going to happen. And so I was stealing from my mom and anyone else I could come in contact with. I manipulated a lot of people or a lot of situations, and it was like, if you benefited my drug use, then I really wanted you in my life. Or if you enabled me to continue using, like, I really wanted you in my life. And that's how it was. Heroin was my only priority, and that was it. That was the end of the story. So I ruined every relationship that I ever had because of that. Because heroin told me that I needed to steal, I need to get money, I need to do whatever it took to get it, and that's what I did, So a result of that, in and out of jail, I was homeless. I had lost so much weight. I was like 104 pounds at one point. My teeth started going bad, all of these things. I had no one in my life except for this one girl that I was in a relationship with. And we really just played off of each other. We enabled each other to, get the drug and continue using the drug. So we were, kind of living, in hotels when we could, with her family if we could, with my family if we could, and we were just kind of making it. But it just got so bad. And it was, we were both abusive toward each other, and the relationship was just about the drugs. So we were homeless at this point, and I had warrants out for my arrest because my judge had put me on house arrest at one point, and I cut the bracelet off immediately. I think it was within like 7 days I had cut the bracelet off and left. And so we were at this hotel, and I don't even know what happened, but I was just like, this is it. It had gotten so bad that I was like, I just can't do it anymore. So I had warrants, and I called my brother, and I just remember saying, come pick me up. And I knew he wasn't just going to come pick me up, but I told him, I was like, I want to turn myself in. It was the only way, that's the only time I had ever been sober, was in jail. So I told him, I want to turn myself in, come pick me up, and he did. He picked me up off of Hopple Street in the middle of winter, and I don't know how I didn't like freeze to death at this time, because we, slept outside the majority of the time. But he did. He picked me up. I went to go turn myself in. It was like, I think it was like December, so the jail's packed. And it was one of the only times I've been recited. And then he didn't know what to do with me. He's got me, and he knows I'm an addict, and I'm sure that I had stolen from him, so he's probably like, I don't want her in my house. But he did. He brought me back to his house, and him and his wife, laid down the ground rules. Like, I didn't get the Wi-Fi password, I didn't get my phone, and all this stuff. And I remember I went through detox at his house. My court date was in like 3 days, and I remember just detoxing, and his wife, my sister-in-law, she's just the most blunt person I've ever met. And I remember she like would come in the room and be like, "Get up," and I'd be like, "God, I don't want to. Like, I'm just sick," and but I knew I had to. So after the 3 days, I did go to jail, and my judge, who had sentenced me to the bracelet, had said, if you mess up, I'm giving you 18 months. That's the longest you can get in Claremont County. And, he's like, I'm giving you 18 months. So I go to court, and he said, you have 540 days on the shelf, and you're getting 540 days in the county. So, but I knew, like, everyone thought I was getting out that day because, like, I came back and I just, I had a smile on my face. And, I mean, what else can you do? I've already been sentenced, and I'm already in jail, so I'm not going to make the situation worse by, crying or whatever it is. But I also knew that's 540 days that I'm going to have clean, and I really thought, like, that was all that mattered. If I just could get some clean time, I could keep it, and that is not the truth by any means. At one point during this time, like before I had gone to jail too, I had this moment where I had overdosed in the middle of August, and the paramedics brought me back, Narcan, and took me to the hospital, and I got out, and within 12 hours I had overdosed again. And it was the same paramedics that picked me up, and I remember them. The only thing I can remember from the ambulance ride is this is the same girl from earlier. And I remember just thinking, like, God, how embarrassing is that the same paramedics that picked me up for the first overdose had to pick me up again. And how inconvenient is it that these paramedics have to stop and revive me when I'm sure there's other people with other stuff going on that they could be helping. And I just remember being so embarrassed by it. And that was kind of the seed that was planted where I was like, I need to do something different. So when I get the 18 months in the county, I'm in the county, and I don't even know what happened, but I ended up in the hole. So I was on 23-hour lockdown every day. And they came in one day and they indicted me on 5 felony charges. And me being the addict that I was like, oh, okay, that's great. I'm going to get out of the hole now, and I'm going to prison. And that's so weird that you would be excited to go to prison. But I was just comfortable. I was comfortable in jail, and that's a scary thought too. I was comfortable in jail, and I knew that prison was a little bit better. You had a little more freedom. There were more programs, and that's what I had always heard. So I was like, all right, let's go to prison. And my public defender for my felony charges, he was like, I think I can get you River City, which is a program. And I kept telling him, like, don't even waste your time. Like, let's just go to prison. Like, let's just go. And it's funny to me now, but it's so weird to think about it, because I just thought, what a waste of time it would be, because I felt like I thought that my brain was broken, is how I used to describe it. And because I just couldn't stay sober. And I thought that if I went to River City, my brain would break again, and I would end up in prison anyway. So my bright idea was, let's just skip that and do the prison. And getting down to my last, where I was getting sentenced, and my public defender said, River City is still on the table if you want it. And I said, if he gives me 4 years, I don't want to go to prison that long, so I'll go to River City then. And I walked in there, and my judge gave me 4.5 years in prison, and I said, let's go to River City. I'll do it now. But that it really did change my life. Because while I was in prison, or not prison, River City, I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I also got introduced to my higher power. And it was some powerful stuff that, like I said, it changed my life. So I got introduced to AA, and I was intrigued because these women would come in there and they would always be laughing and smiling and just having a great time. And I'm like, how can they come in here and be so happy about it? Like, they have to sit with us for an hour, and I just thought it was so inconvenient for them. And but it really it changed me, because I was like, okay, like, let's go see why they're happy, and let's try and get that. So that was, the start of, that seed that had been planted with AA, and I was intrigued, so I kept going. I went to AA every night that they were there. I went, and they offered church on Sunday, and I never went. But I remember I got in trouble this one time, and in River City, when you get in trouble, you skip all free time. You're not allowed to have free time anymore, and what they call it is riding the rail. So whenever free time is happening, you have to take a chair upstairs and you face the wall, so that you can't even engage in free time. And I remember it was Sunday, and I was in trouble, so I was up on the rail, and the church people had come in, and everyone else who was on the rail went downstairs to go to church. And the lady, the RA who was working, came upstairs, and she said, well, why didn't you go to church? And I said, I'm not going to use God as an excuse to get out of trouble right now, I'm not going to go to church just to get off the rail. And she was like, well, whatever it takes to get you in there, right? And it changed my life, because I went to church and I was just interested. I believed in something that was bigger than me. I just didn't know what. I didn't know. I was a person who wanted proof, and I wanted to, know specifics, and I wanted you to prove it to me that there was, I don't know what it was, but it also planted that seed, and I just remained interested. And I wanted to know more. And the lady who slept next to me was very religious. And so I would make her stay up at night and go over the Bible with me, and just kind of tell me what, certain things meant, or, explain things to me and break it down. And that began this relationship that I now have with God, which again, it just changed my life. So after River City, I knew the whole point of me going to jail and ending up in River City was because I wanted to, finally get sober. So while I was in there, I decided, I'm going to go to sober living. It works for other people, it's going to work for me. So I went to sober living, and I think within a month I had relapsed. And got kicked out of sober living, and was in the same situation that I was before. And this is the thing, is that I wasn't willing to do what they told me to do. I just wanted to do things my way, because I knew so much. And I wasn't willing to give up my old friends, or and I was doing meetings, I was doing the step work, but I was doing it kind of half-assed. Excuse my language. So whenever they would tell me to do something, I'd be like, okay, but I'm still going to do it my way. And that's not how you do it. That's no wonder that I was still sick, because I was still holding on to God's will for me. I was, making it mine, and trying to do it my way, and it doesn't work like that. So within a month I relapsed, and I was in the same boat, and I was back at my mom's house. And and this is the thing too, addiction doesn't take anything from me. I just give it away. I give it all away. Because again, heroin, it makes itself my one priority, and that's it. So I don't need, a house or an apartment or a car or anything like that. So things, progressively just get worse. And by the end of my time, in active addiction, this is how it was. I was on felony probation, and I was in CRC, outpatient. I was doing groups there, and I was with this other girl, and I wasn't using every day, which doesn't make a difference, but I wasn't using every day like I had before. It was like this. I didn't want to use, and I kept using. I would use one day, and I would stay clean for 2 or 3 weeks or a month or however long, and I would not want to use by any means. Like, I did not want anything to do with it, and I would end up with a needle in my arm, and I couldn't comprehend how it kept happening. And I was just struggling so bad. I didn't know a solution or how to just stop. So I called my felony probation officer, and I told her, look, I'm struggling. I think I need to go back to inpatient rehab. And she said, there's nothing I can do for you. You haven't failed a drug test. Claremont County has limited resources, and I was already in CRC. So then I called my CRC counselor as well, and I said, look, I'm struggling, and I think I need inpatient rehab. And he said, I don't know what I can do for you. So I didn't know what to do. So I was just desperate, and I was helpless, and so I did what I always did, and the only solution that I had was to do drugs. So that's what I did. And when I'm in that phase, or when I'm in that, where I'm using and, drugging and drinking, like, I distance myself from everyone. And that's what I did. I was walking around Batavia one night, and I'm sure it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was using, but I had posted something on Facebook, and I'm not sure what it was, but a girl that I had met in AA messaged me, and she said, what are you doing? And I told her. She said, well, I'm going to come pick you up, and, we're going to talk. And she probably listened to me cry for 2 hours about how I wanted to stay sober, but I couldn't, and she probably thought I was full of crap. But she was like, have you ever heard of this place called ARC? And I had no idea what she was talking about. I thought she was talking about a museum or something, like, but she told me it was Adams Recovery Center. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But she was like, here's a number. If you really want to do this, call the number. It's all on you. And I did. I immediately called. I got an assessment. And when I went to the assessment, they said, you're perfect for this program, but we have no beds available. And it was like a shot in the heart, because I was so desperate at this point. And I was like, gosh, even rehab doesn't want me. And but a week later they called me, and they were ready. They had a bed available, so I went to ARC, and it was literally just exactly what I needed. It was a different program, and they focused on the individual and not the group as a whole. So literally everything that I worked on there was completely different from the next person. And it was really what I needed. And it was also, it's called a therapeutic community, and what that means is all of my peers hold me accountable on everything. And I really needed that too, because I didn't see a lot of my flaws or my faults, and they were able to show me. So things that I didn't even know that I needed to work on, they showed me that I did need to work on them, and I got the chance to do that. It also gave me, I had a grieving process in there. The program was just, individually for me, like, it was just exactly what I needed at the exact right time, and it saved my life. So I had the chance to work on myself and, work on these flaws and try to counteract them or correct them. So getting to the end of my stay at ARC, I was terrified, but I had decided I'm going to do sober living again, and I did that. And also in the process, I met my now fiance, and it's the strangest thing ever, but they say like don't get in a relationship in the first year of sobriety, and I totally get that. But she was, another alcoholic, so she understood what the program was, and we also went into the relationship with an understanding, and it was our programs come first, and everything else comes second, or whatever. But we always stood by that, and that's why it worked so well. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, like if I think, she needs to go to a meeting or she needs to, maybe talk to her sponsor, like that has saved my butt many times by her, telling me like, maybe you should get to a meeting, because she understands. And that's the most important thing in our relationship. We don't have a relationship if we don't have a recovery. So I met her, and that really helped me because she also had, resources for me. She got me into sober living. I went to sober living because of her. But when I got out of ARC and went to sober living, every time I explain this, this is the only way that I can explain it. I was literally like a newborn child who had to learn how to live. And people in Alcoholics Anonymous helped me learn how to live. I probably stayed in sober living for 9 months, I think, before my fiance and I got an apartment. And that poor girl waited forever because she was in sober living a long time before I was. And, when she was ready, I wasn't, and I had to step up and say, I'm not ready. I'm still scared. So we finally did get an apartment, but people in AA literally just taught me how to live my life. I had never had an apartment before then. I never had my license. I never had a bill in my name, didn't know how to pay bills. I didn't know how to be a person in society. But also, like, after I had gotten out of ARC, I had so much stuff to deal with, too. It was so overwhelming. And my initial thought was, like, my solution is drugs. But I had to learn, like, I had community service that I had to deal with, and court, and I was still on probation, and I had to go to IOP, aftercare for ARC. And that was 3 days a week. I also had a job, and I went to meetings. So my schedule was so packed for so long, months and months, but I just became willing, That whole time I was so unwilling, and when I went into ARC, I was just like, I'm willing to do whatever you guys want, because my way isn't working. So when I got out, I just kept that mindset, and I just was willing to do whatever it took to stay sober and to do what I needed to do. And that's what I did. I completed the community service. Again, we're doing baby steps of progression. And so that's what I did, the community service. I finished the community service. I was paying on my fines and stuff. I finally paid them off, so I didn't have to go to court anymore. I finished IOP, so I, didn't have to do that anymore. And at one point, just recently, maybe a year ago, I got off felony probation, and it was just, the smallest baby step that meant so much to me. But that's just what it is, just little bits of progression, and it just keeps me motivated and keeps me wanting sobriety. So we had our apartment and, paying bills and learning how to live, and we decided that both of us, we wanted to go back to school. So in that process, Amy's grandma has a house, but she was living in Florida. So Amy's dad offered for us to live at the house while we were going back to school. And such a blessing, we pay bills, but we don't have to pay rent. So it just saved us money to save for school. And it's just like a blessing that I never would have had that opportunity, if I was still using. But So again, like I'm just willing, and people in AA taught me that. And also, like, I just surrounded myself in AA. And because of that, like, people in AA helped me move twice. And they keep me from, they hold me accountable, and they keep me from, that insanity of thinking that the solution is drugs. So we moved to Delhi last April, I believe. It's almost been a year. And shortly afterwards, I got into school. But when I had moved, like my sponsor in AA was still in Blanchester, and it just wasn't working out because we could never meet up. It was an hour away from me, and she, was running a sober living house, and she has 5 kids, and all of this stuff, and it just wasn't working out, and so I had to find a new sponsor. So my sponsor now is, they tell you to find a sponsor that you want, like what they have. And I wanted what she had so bad. So I immediately, like, that was the first person that I thought of. And I had met her while I was in my first sober living. And I had like 4 months sober when I had run into her again. And it was like, I was terrified to go back to this place that held the meetings because I was like, they all know that I relapsed. So I was terrified, and I just didn't want to be judged, and, all of that stuff. And, I ran into her. I had like 4 months sober, and it was like nothing ever happened. And she just made me feel so comfortable, and, she wasn't judging me, and, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that I came back, and it was just, she just had what I wanted. I remember, seeing that, the first couple times that I had met her, she was always just, very happy, and, she just works one heck of a program, and I wanted that. So when I moved, that was the first person that I thought of, and I still every day want what she has. She's a role model to me, and she again just helps me learn what I need to know. I'm still learning how to live, and she continues to hold me accountable when I need that, and teaches me how to live my life. I did want to say too that, while I was in ARC and, learning all these things, like, I had talked about my self-worth so much, and they picked up on it. That, like, without me even having to say anything, they knew that I needed to work on my self-worth, and that I didn't know who I was underneath that mask. I didn't want to tell anyone that I was wearing this mask because if you knew what was underneath, you weren't going to like me either. And I was also confused about who was underneath there anyway. So when I was in ARC, like, they knew. I didn't have to say anything. They knew what was going on. So they called me out on it, and that afforded me the opportunity to work on it. And I really did get the chance to, like, find out who I was. And it's such I went 25 years without knowing who I was, and it's still a learning process. It's still something that I'm dealing with. I still work on my self-worth, but it was one of the most amazing things that has ever happened to me, to be able to sit down and really just focus on myself and what was going on underneath, and so it's something that I really hold on to. So I now live in Delhi. I'm in school. I have a 4.0 GPA, which is crazy because for someone who never did homework or, skipped school all the time, it's just amazing. I have my license and insurance and a car, and I just actually got those less than a year ago. I was 27 years old, never had a license, never had a car. Again, just learning how to live my life. We live in this amazing house. I just got to redo the kitchen in it. tore out some 1960s wallpaper, but it's stuff that I get to do today, and it keeps everything in my life is keeps me humble and it's just all a reminder of what I could be doing, how my life could be, and what it's like now. And I use everything as motivation. It's just another motivator to do what I need to do, and another motivator to stay in sobriety. So yeah, I'm in school. I have a car, all this stuff. I had the opportunity to carry the message into a local jail, which is interesting. I got to, for a long time, I got to go into the jail and leave when I wanted to, which was another humbling experience, and just carry the solution in there and let these girls know that there's another way of life. It's just an amazing experience. I also had the opportunity to go into ARC and carry the message in there, and I did that for around 2 years. I've been able to, every Thursday I was there religiously, and I got to talk to the girls, who were sitting in these seats that I had sat in myself, which was amazing. And I recently had to quit doing that, but it's because I now work at ARC, which is another crazy experience. And I mean, 3 years ago, I never would have imagined that this would be my life. 3 years ago, if you would have asked me, what I thought sobriety was or what I thought I would gain in sobriety, I never would have imagined that this is what it would be. I highly underestimated sobriety and what it could bring to me, because my life is way better than I could have ever anticipated. So I now work at the same recovery center that I got sober in, and it's the most amazing thing ever. I get to go in and I work at the men's facility, and I get to talk to these guys who are in the same seats that I was in, and work in this environment that I want to work in and be in. And it's amazing. Every day I go in, I love my job, and those are my people, I get to work with them every single day, and it's just amazing. I don't know how I can end this. There's no fireworks or any grand thing that happens. All I know is that today I live my life still willing to do whatever it takes. And I no longer think I can control stuff. I don't take the wheel. I let God do all that. And it's been amazing. It's been one heck of a ride, and I can't wait to, figure out what tomorrow holds. I don't know. I'm just over 2.5 years sober, and I feel like I have just began. Like I've just now started living. And I know that there's so much more in store, but I couldn't have had that. I needed that experience, and I needed that time in that struggle to really make me who I am today, and I don't regret it one bit. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it, and that's all.